Hey, good afternoon. The Friday message today is about how to help students not be able to answer questions correctly, but how to actually input answers. I think one of the areas that students are going to struggle, just because they don't have any familiarity with it, is the gridded response questions that are in the math section, where a lot of the science sub-score points come from as well. There are on the PSAT, there are 48 total math questions. 8 of them are these graded response questions. They come from both the calculator and non-calculator portion. And then in the SAT, 12 of the 58 questions are these graded response questions, 5 from the non-calculator, 7 from the calculator. So the ability to actually bubble in and fill in correctly is key for this. I actually found out the hard way, if you will, where I took a practice that I created and I actually forgot to circle one of the bubbles in. I wrote it in correctly above, but I didn't bubble it in correctly, and therefore I got it wrong. To write the answers in the boxes above is not mandatory. They won't help the students score at all. It's just a way for students to be able to organize what they're going to bubble in. And I think it's a good idea to do both of those too. So this is from, this sheet here is on every test. It's in every test. It's directions for students. But the more that they know this and internalize it, and the less they have to think about it every time, the better off they're going to be. And after I go through the style of the SAT, I'll show you how you can create all of these questions in Mastery Manager to help students out. So again, to follow the directions here, this part up here, the 7 divided by 12, is not necessary to actually write in. It's just to help students be able to fill in the bubbles correctly. Mark no more than one circle in any column, but you do not need to mark every column. You can have blank columns. If you only have a 3-digit number, it doesn't matter if you write the digit 222 and leave it blank, and I'll show you an example of this later, or blank 222. That's fine. It doesn't matter if you start on the left or on the right. What does matter though is the bubbles, and if it is a blank spot, if it's just a 3-digit answer, then you don't have to fill in anything in that column. No question has a negative answer. That's a great way for students to check their work as they're going through. If they solve a problem, they get a negative, they know they screwed something up. They're all going to be positive. Some problems have more than one correct answer. So I'm going to skip over 5 and jump down to 6. An example of that would be if the answer is something related to 2/3. Students can either do the fraction form, so 2 divided by 3, and they would actually bubble in 2 divided by 3. Again, it doesn't matter if they start 2 on the left and then go divided by and then 3 and then leave the last column empty, or leave the first column empty and do 2 divided by 3. Either way is acceptable. Or if the student would rather use a decimal format, then they can either use the 3-digit truncated decimal where it's 0.666, or they can do the rounded where it's 0.667. You can put all of these in as acceptable answers in Mastery Manager to generate a bubble sheet exactly like this. If it's a 2-decimal answer, if it's 0.25, it doesn't matter if they do 0.25 and then leave the last one blank, or leave the first one blank and do 0.25. But if it's going to be 3 or more digits for their answer with the decimals, then they have to put 3 in there. Again, it can either be truncated or rounded. If it's a mixed number, such as 3 1/2, if they put that in as 3 1/2, the computer will read that as 31 halves. So they cannot put in mixed numbers. Students must put in either the decimal format, 3.5 is fine, or 7 halves. Again, that's all the same value, but the computer will read 7 halves differently than 3 1/2, which it reads as 31 halves. So important skills for students to be able to move back and forth and understand what to do in the SAT, so that way they don't get marked wrong even though they have the right answer simply because they grid the response in incorrectly. So I'm going to switch over to Mastery Manager and show you some templates that you can create in there. So I created this very simple test. Graded response questions are considered to be multiple choice questions. So I created 5 of those, one so I can show you each different type of template you can set up. Made it with my class so that way you could see different forms. So when you go into the answer key and layout, the type of question you want is multiple choice gridded response. The bubbles doesn't matter because you're not going to have bubbles now. You will fill in the answer box, the number of answer boxes you want later for each question. So multiple choice, gridded response, whichever questions you want for it to be, hit apply, and you'll have that set up. Now within the different types of gridded responses, there are 5 main areas, and I'll show you an example of each of these. Decimal, whole, or fraction is the SAT format. That's where there will be the fraction sign at the top, and then you will have the decimal underneath that, and then you'll have 0 through 9 going vertically underneath that. You can choose anywhere from 1 to 26 different boxes in terms of the length of numbers that students can put in. All the SAT questions are for. You can choose whether you want a positive or a negative, and again, I'll show you what this looks like in just a second. Again, all of the ones for the SAT are positive, so they would put no, don't put a sign there, but if you want the students to be able to choose whether it's a positive or negative, then you can do that. There is no plus minus, it's either plus or minus. And then you can put in a symbol also that you want the students to have to put in. That could be either no symbol at all, it could be a dollar sign, or it could be a percent sign. And so I'll show you an example of that. If you look at this template here, this is exactly what I was talking about, where I have 4 answer boxes. It's a decimal, whole number, or fraction. So you don't have to use any of these decimals or fraction marks, but you can. I chose to have a plus or a minus as the first one, where students have to choose one of those, and then here's your numerical response. The SAT will not have this first column, but will look exactly like the rest of that. The second choice is just decimal or whole, so it gets rid of the fraction. But what you can do now is choose how many spots you want to have before the decimal and how many spots you want to have after the decimal. So if you were doing an interest problem where students need to determine what the value of something will be after a certain amount of time with a certain interest rate, this may be something you want to do where there's a dollar sign. You could also change the number of boxes to just a general template if you're doing, say, a significant figures problem. And students have to figure out how many sig figs to put in because they can leave answer spots blank. They don't need to fill every one in. So a variety of choices you can do there. Again, anywhere from 1 to 26 spots. So an example of that would be number 2 here, where I have a dollar sign out front. That's automatically put in for them. And I had put that I wanted 4 answer choices before the decimal and 2 answer choices after the decimal, which would make sense for a monetary problem where you have the 2 after the decimal. A third choice is fraction, and with fraction, what that will do is the answer has to be a fraction. I selected a dollar sign. I don't know why I did that, because I probably would have a dollar sign with the fraction problem. But again, what you do is you put in how large is the numerator going to be and how large is the denominator going to be. You can have blanks in there before and after each one, so it's not going to really impact that too much. But this way you could have a certain number of spots in each area of the fraction. So that type of problem looks like this, number 3. Again, I selected the dollar sign. Doesn't really make any sense for why you would have a dollar sign with this kind of problem, but I had 2 numbers that would be in the numerator and 3 that would be in the denominator. Fourth type of question is operations. What this will do is it will put in the answer choices will have the basic operations in front of it. So the answer that I put in for this one as what I would accept was 3 plus 2 equals 5. So students would bubble 3 plus 2 equals 5. Now there are no questions like this on the SAT, but that doesn't mean you couldn't give them to them. One thing that I noticed on the printout is that the plus sign and the divided by sign look very similar. So if you do print this out, that's probably something that you're going to want to point out to kids, that it's the addition on top and that's the division right above the equal sign. The last type of question is alphabetic. You can, again, put in however many letters you want to go across, but this is where the answer choice would be simply alphabetic. So if when you are working on DNA and you would want students to have the answer to be ATGC, then you could have them select that. If you're working on a geometry problem and you want them to select which triangle is the one that represents an isosceles, and they could put in triangle ABC for that instead of another answer choice, which could be triangle DEF. So a lot of different options you can do. These are the 5 basic formats that you can use. But again, the format that SAT uses is this one here that I have for problem number 1, where it's the whole decimal fraction choice, where you have the fraction, you have the decimals, and then you have your numerical answers. I played around with some answers to see how it would work. So the answer number 1 was 222. So I created it where I left the first one blank and then put 222 and bubbled in my 222, and that was marked correctly. I put in the answer this way, where it was 222 and then nothing at the end. I bubbled in 222, left this blank, and that was correct. But I could see students not wanting to leave something blank, figuring that it would be wrong. This 0 in front of the 222 really means nothing, but when I bubbled in 0222, that was incorrect. So they can leave spots blank. That is okay, and I think students need to know that. Then the second one I put in was a fraction-based problem. And so I tried 2 divided by 3. That worked. I tried 2 divided by 3. That worked. I tried 0.666, and that worked. And I tried 0.667, and that also worked. So let me show you there how I set that up. I need to get into a different test, so it will take me 1 second to get in there. When you put in your answer keys, if you want to be able to accept multiple answers, you can put that in for the graded response. So I thought 2/3, 2 divided by 3 would be an acceptable answer, so I put that in. Then you just put a comma before the next one that you want. So then I also would accept 0.667, the rounded version, comma, the truncated version. You put those in as all possible answers, and the system will recognize that if any of those are put in, then it will be correct. So that's how you can set up one of the graded response questions, so that way it turns out to look like this with the answer choices of 2/3, 0.666, or 0.667 all as being accepted. I really think it would be valuable for students to see this and to practice this. I think it would be important for us to make tests where in the free response section we give it to them as a graded response so they get used to doing this. I will also share with you some different practice tests where there are examples of these kinds of problems for students to be able to use. If you have further questions about it, obviously please come and see me. This is longer than usual, going on 12 minutes here. Hopefully you stayed with me for most of it, and hopefully this will be useful for our students as we move into the SAT starting on Wednesday.